Welcome to this video on user research for social impact. Today, we'll be learning about the importance of user research for social impact. We'll discuss the principles of user research, how it fits into design thinking, how do you figure out who your users are, and user research methods. By the end of this session, you should be able to recognize the importance of user research in driving meaningful social impact, apply and uphold core principles of ethical and effective user research, explain and evaluate various user research methods, embed user research within each stage of the design thinking process. Without consulting research, decisions would be based on assumptions rather than evidence, increasing the risk of developing ineffective or irrelevant solutions, leading to wasted resources, user dissatisfaction, and missed opportunities. So before we go any further, just want to clarify some definitions. User, in this case, is anyone who interacts with or is impacted by a product, service, or system. This includes individuals who directly engage with it, as well as those who may benefit from or be affected by its outcomes. User research is the process of understanding user behaviors, needs, and motivations through observation, interviews, surveys, and other feedback methods. It involves gathering information to inform the design and development of products, services, or solutions. And social impact is the effect or influence that actions or projects have on society, improving the well-being of individuals and or communities, and contributing to long-term social, economic, or environmental progress. A little more on designing for social impact. So this is the social design components framework. At the core of all social design activities is the aim to serve the common good. So we have social values, resilience, care, responsiveness, political progress, and social capital that try and guide social goals, as we can see on the outer circle. These social values, so we've got resilience, so the capacity of social, economic, and environmental systems to withstand disturbances. Care, taking responsibility for the safety and well-being of individuals or groups. Responsiveness, the quality of responding and reacting quickly and appropriately. Political progress, the advancements in freedom and justice-based norms. And social capital, so recognizing that individuals are social beings within a community that are defined by shared values. This aims to foster collaboration and discover new ways of working together effectively. On to user research. So why is it important? It helps us to understand real-world user needs and challenges. It helps to drive innovation by providing deep insights into what is actually needed, and it helps to ensure inclusive, equitable solutions. It helps to reduce risk by making sure that decisions are based on actual data, meaning that we avoid costly mistakes. Engages with users and stakeholders in the design process, which increases buy-in and support for the final outcomes. And it supports empathy-driven design. It's really important that user research follows certain principles. Firstly, do no harm. It's important that we prioritize the well-being of individuals who we're researching. We need to make sure that we have informed consent, so participants must understand the research, methods, potential risks, benefits before freely consenting. We need to ensure privacy and confidentiality. We need to make sure that research is inclusive and we respect diversity. We need to be transparent with what we're doing and we need to take accountability. And finally, there needs to be value creation. There needs to be something that comes out of it that is going to improve user experiences. Here we are back at our design thinking stages. User research should be embedded in each stage of the design thinking process. We start with empathizing, understanding user needs and experiences with our user research. We then use that to formulate our problem statements. We then use our research insights to brainstorm and develop ideas. We create scaled solutions based on real user feedback. We then test these prototypes with real users. And then we roll out the solution with all users and again evaluate the response. Here are just a few examples of how embedding knowledge about what people actually need into the design thinking process can have a positive social impact. Things like accessible public space design, inclusive playgrounds that accommodate all ability levels, sustainable and affording housing projects, inclusive and diverse representations of people in media and advertising, microfinancing small business loans in developing countries to help empower women. By grounding design in user insights, organizations can create solutions that not only meet demands, but also anticipate future challenges, ensuring inclusivity, sustainability, and long-term success in an ever-changing digital landscape. Who are your users? This is a really critical step. It sounds silly to say, but it's important to identify who your users are so that you can create tailored solutions that actually meet their needs. Start by identifying the broad categories of primary user groups. So they might be service recipients, internal stakeholders, external partners. Use your personas and empathy maps to help figure out who's in the landscape. Understand subgroup granularity. So not all users in a group have the same needs. Breaking down primary user groups into subgroups ensures more tailored solutions. Map out these subgroups to visualize the user landscape. For example, persons with a disability may be considered a primary user group, but here in Australia, Australian Bureau of Statistics actually recognises 6 subgroups of disability: sensory and speech, intellectual, physical, psychosocial, head injury, stroke and ABI, and other that restrict everyday activities. So consider how each of those subgroups needs might actually differ from one another. So individuals with impaired hearing might have very different experiences to those with an acquired brain injury. Another important consideration is intersectionality. So what is intersectionality? It is the concept that individuals experience overlapping social identities that create unique experiences and challenges. People don't just belong to one category. So when you're conducting your user research, consider how this might actually impact on their perspective or challenges they may face. By addressing intersectionality, we ensure that we have more inclusive and equitable solutions. User research methods. There are so many user research methods, and we won't be able to cover all of them, but we will be going through common methods, and they include data mining, observation, case studies, surveys and questionnaires, interviews, focus groups and participatory design, and creative methods. Mixed methods. So sometimes one method will be more appropriate than another, and we might need to use mixed methods to capture all of the data that's necessary. We need both quantitative and qualitative to provide a really holistic view of the problem. Using multiple methods can also help us validate findings by cross-referencing data and providing a more robust understanding of user needs. Let's do a little refresher on quantitative versus qualitative data. So quantitative refers to numerical information that can be measured, counted, such as percentages, frequencies, statistics. And this is really important for conveying key insights about large groups of people. It can help distill complex data into clear, actionable information, helps us identify patterns and trends. Whereas qualitative data refers to the non-numerical information that captures the qualities, experiences, perspectives of individuals and groups, such as opinions, emotions, and behaviors. So let's get into it. Do you already have a bunch of information and secondary data that you could actually analyze to gain insight about your users? Data mining is the process of discovering patterns, correlations, trends within large sets of data using stats, maths, and computational techniques. So you might already have some data sets that could hold insights about your users, but often data analysis is guided by the answers that you're looking for. So it means that we need to ask different questions for more varied data analysis. Pros. It's a great option when there are large existing data sets. The quantitative stats are really helpful in communicating key user characteristics. Cons. We need to depend on the data quality. So the data needs to be comprehensive, up to date, and really relevant to the user groups in question. It can also be quite complex and it requires specialized analysis skills that means that we also need to be ethically minded about how are we interpreting these statistics. Questions to consider. What are the gaps in your data sets? How will you focus your analysis? Why was this data collected and how reliable is the source? How can we assess the credibility of the data? What time frame does it cover? Is it still relevant? And how will you ensure that we're upholding data privacy and compliance with regulations? Observations. So observing users in their natural settings without interfering with their behavior. We can gather observations in almost any situation. Um, They can help provide us with insight into pain points, roadblocks, workarounds people use, and we can get a few clues for how we might solve our problems. There's a variation on this, which is contextual inquiry. So we can blend observation with questioning, where researchers can ask users questions while they perform tasks in their natural environment. Observation is excellent at providing real-world behavior data. It also reveals implicit understandings and practices of users that they may not be able to verbally articulate in interviews or surveys. The difficulties with observations is that it can be time consuming, there's potential for observer bias, and you need to consider the observer reliability. This is where positionality would come in and training. This is just a basic observation guide. Usually with observations, we have a framework to work around. We need to understand who we are observing, what is the person doing, what is the behavior, what is the pattern, where, when, why, and how, and there'd be space for notes. This is really important to develop beforehand. It might involve a pilot study where you do conduct some observations and you realize there are certain things that you want your observers to be able to pick up on or pay attention to. So it's really important to develop your own observation guide based on the context of what you are trying to find out. Questions to consider. What specific behaviors or interactions are you aiming to observe? Really define the focus of your observations. What is the context of the environment that you will be observing? What methods will you be using to record your observations? So this is where we think about notes, video recordings, audio recordings. What will best capture the data that you need? And also, how will you minimize observer bias during the study? So this is where strategies, protocols need to be in place beforehand and also monitoring throughout. Case studies. So case studies involve an in-depth examination of a particular individual, group, organization, or phenomenon over a specified period. It's really helpful for understanding complex issues, contexts, and interactions in a specific context. And whether they're positive or negative, they can provide really valuable insights into best practices and common pitfalls. Case studies are great at offering in-depth insights into specific contexts. They provide a holistic view of an environment with factors that influence the case, that helps researchers to understand how context shapes outcomes. The difficulty is that it may not be applicable to broader populations or settings, so it limits the scope of what we can take from the case study. Some things you might want to consider is what specific research questions do you aim to address through the case study? And how will this inform how you select your case? So consider how the chosen case represents the broader context. So what's the applicability? How far can you take that case and apply it to other situations? What limitations might affect the outcomes of your case study? So acknowledge the potential constraints such as sample size or context. What are the ethical considerations? So always when we're conducting case studies, we need to obtain informed consent and make sure that we protect participants' confidentiality. Surveys. Surveys provide a cost-effective and scalable approach to reaching large and diverse audiences, enabling organizations to make informed decisions based on direct feedback. Surveys involve structured questionnaires distributed to a wide audience, allowing for the collection of data on a number of topics. So, for example, they can be used to gather information on service satisfaction levels from large groups of users. I can almost guarantee that every one of us has filled out a survey or a questionnaire. They are very flexible to roll out. We can do them in person, we can do them on paper, we can do them online, and they can be easily customized to explore specific areas of interest. We can also use existing measures that have already been tested and validated, which is pretty handy. The pros, they are cost effective, particularly when we can use online tools. They're scalable, so we can reach larger groups. They're great for quantitative data. And there might already be existing measures that we can use to have a look at the things that we're interested in. However, the cons, we are limited to the questions that we ask. So we might not get a lot of depth. We might miss things. We might create these surveys based on our assumptions and miss key information. It also relies on the understanding of the respondents. So we're really thinking about literacy, we're thinking about comprehension. They may misunderstand the question, they may not even read the question and tick a box. We're also open to response bias. So particularly if we're asking about sensitive issues, people may provide socially desirable responses, which doesn't necessarily give us accurate data. Questions to consider when you're conducting surveys. How will you reach your target population? If you're looking into diverse populations, then you have to consider that they may have limited literacy or access to internet. They might be in very remote locations. How will you reach them? What type of questions will you use? Are they going to be closed, open, Likert scale? The questions will guide what kind of data you get, and then we have to think about your analysis. So we really need to be very decisive about question types. How will you ensure the clarity and neutrality of your questions? We want to try and minimize bias. We want to try and make sure that we're not leading responses. We want to truly uncover what our users need. What steps will you take to ensure a high response rate? So surveys, they're a little bit of a pain sometimes. We're asking people to give up their time. So what strategies, incentives, reminders, how will you make it easier for people to participate? Interviews facilitate a deeper exploration of individual perspectives, allowing us to capture the why behind user behaviors and preferences, offering nuanced understanding that might be overlooked in quantitative methods. Interviews involve one-on-one conversations designed to gain deeper insight into user experiences. So, for example, interviewing marginalised communities can help uncover barriers that they face when accessing services. Interviews allow for flexible questioning, enabling researchers to probe deeper into topics as they arise in the conversation. Conducting interviews, though, requires really good active listening and interpersonal skills. We need to foster trust and rapport between the interviewer and the interviewee. Pros of interviews means that we have this direct connection with users and allows for real-time follow-up and clarification, gives us far more detail and nuanced understanding of their thoughts, feelings, experiences. However, it can be resource and time intensive. It requires interviewers to be really well trained because interpersonal factors can influence what and how the information is collected. There can be bias on either side, and it could affect the authenticity of the data. So this is by no means an exhaustive how-to, but it gives you a really basic outline. You need to be clear on your objectives about what you want to learn from your interviews. You need to figure out what type of interview you want to conduct, open, semi-structured, or structured. You need to develop your questions so that they align with your objectives. And this can be trickier than first thought. You need to choose your participants that represent your target user groups. Ensure that participants feel safe and respected during the interview, and record with permission and analyze those responses for patterns, themes, and insights. A different strategy with interviews is extreme user interviews. So this involves gathering insights from individuals at opposite ends of the user spectrum. So these extreme users usually display heightened characteristics of your target audience. So a really simple example we have is if you are researching a kitchen appliance, interviewing a professional chef can provide an in-depth perspective on the cooking experience. But on the other hand, if you've got someone who rarely cooks, that can also provide us with really valuable insights from a completely different angle. Just a few questions to consider. Are you seeking in-depth qualitative information? And is this best addressed by an interview? Do you have the resources to engage with marginalised or hard-to-reach community? Have a think about how you might brainstorm some solutions for equitable engagement. How will interviewers be sensitive to potential communication differences? How will you ensure a comfortable environment for participants to encourage the most honest responses? How will they be trained? Interviews are great, but what if we could conduct multiple interviews at the same time? Focus groups. Moderated discussions that encourage interaction among a group of participants to gather insights. So these are really effective for exploring the needs and perspectives of various demographic groups or subgroups of our user population. For example, we can facilitate a group discussion with elderly users around shared challenges like accessibility and digital services, navigating online forms. It can provide diverse perspectives through collective discussion. So we can reveal shared experiences and differing viewpoints. Both are valuable. It's really useful for identifying common themes or challenges that may not be able to be detected in the one-on-one interviews. So pros. They're really great at discussing open-ended ideas, experiences that we just haven't anticipated. The group format can also be really great for building rapport and trust, which usually yields more honest and detailed responses from participants. However, on the flip side, we can get groupthink where there's a desire for harmony and conformity, which means that we sort of miss out on some of those differing opinions. There might be some group dynamics that might be some strong voices that need to be tightly moderated. So we need some skilled facilitation and moderation in there. Data analysis can also be tricky because they generate a lot of qualitative data, and there needs to be a really succinct plan on how you are going to tackle the analysis of qualitative data. What are you trying to get out of it? Just a few things. Few questions to consider. How will you recruit a diverse and representative group? Really need to make sure that you can accommodate participant availability and minimize barriers to attendance to make sure that we capture all voices. How many participants will be optimal? Usually 6 to 8 is kind of a good number because it's big enough to have a group discussion, but not too big that it gets overwhelming. What is the ideal setting? Depending on your participants, that's something that's going to be really key to keeping them comfortable and engaged. How will we ensure participant confidentiality when it relates to group discussions? Depending on the topic, we really need to make sure that there's a safe environment for participants to be able to talk about what they need to talk about honestly and safely. Participatory design. We are getting into co-design territory here. It's a collaborative approach. We actively involve users in the design process. We allow them to contribute their insights, experiences, and preferences to co-create solutions. So this is great for encouraging a sense of ownership among users. It helps create buy-in. They are invested in the outcomes. They are helping to shape the solutions tailored to their specific needs. It also enhances creativity and innovation. When you start to bring in diverse perspectives, it can lead to more inclusive and user-centered outcomes. Pros. It empowers users, it encourages creativity, and it leads to solutions that are more likely to be adopted by users. However, it can be time-consuming and resource-intensive. It has the potential to be messy with lots of different opinions, and it really requires skilled facilitation to balance the input from different participants. So, few questions to consider. How will involving users enhance the relevance and usability of the design solution? So, when you're doing this, you need to be clear on who you want to consult and why. You also need to have a framework or methodology that will help you facilitate these sessions. There needs to be some kind of structure that is flexible enough to accommodate differences and different perspectives, different ideas, but needs to be tight enough to stay on track. Do you have skilled facilitators? You need to invest in people who can run these groups. And what resources? What do you actually need? to run these sessions? What's going to be the most helpful for you? You don't necessarily have to be restricted to traditional user methods. It can really help to think outside the box and embrace creativity. This is where creative methods are great. They are non-traditional, imaginative approaches to gathering user insights. They go above and beyond conventional techniques. They are far more expressive and reflective, but they can be tricky to think about how you would actually put them into place. Here are just a few methods that you might like to consider. Storytelling. Participants share their experiences, encouraged by prompts that help them to reflect on their own journey. Collage or drawing. Role-playing. Journey mapping is great when you want to have a look at a visual map of their experience from start to finish. Gamification can make things fun. And photo voice. Photo voice exhibition is really special. It's where participants use cameras to capture their lived experiences and they create visual narratives. And if there's an exhibition, it becomes more than just this display of images. It can actually be really empowering and be a form of advocacy, which is really special. So one of the things that I want to bring your attention to is there's this spotlight on London Policy and Strategy Network. They are excellent when it comes to innovative mixed methods, going above and beyond to conduct user research. I've got a video link here and there's an article as well. I really encourage you to go check it out. They are pretty impressive. Pros. They allow participants to express their experiences and emotions. They make it interactive, fun, less formal, and they really empower marginalized voices by offering alternative ways for expression. However, they are a little more difficult to organize. They can be a bit more abstract and difficult to interpret. It's resource intensive. It could be daunting for some people. They might feel a little hesitant or uncomfortable. And insights will be highly context specific, so you need to keep that in mind. After all that, what methods should you use? The choice is yours. You are the design thinker and you get to exercise your agency as such. Think critically, evaluate the unique context of the project you're working on and the diverse needs of your users. Be creative, adopt mixed methods. Here are some additional resources just for your learning. This is the Common Social Policy Research Methods fact sheet from the New South Wales Government. It's really handy. Got a table of the different types of research, what it is, pros, cons, highly recommend. We've also included a website from Digital New South Wales. It's a user research methods online toolkit. Highly recommend you go check that out. And these two articles really helpful when thinking about including the public in service design. Key considerations to take away. User research is critical for designing services that drive social impact. There are a variety of methods that exist to gather insights. Choosing the right method is key to understanding your user. By centering users, we ensure solutions that are inclusive, impactful, and innovative. When in doubt, revisit the social values and social goals you are aiming to achieve. Let's review our learning outcomes. So hopefully by the end of this session, you can now recognize the importance of user research in driving meaningful social impact. You'll be able to apply and uphold core principles of ethical and effective user research. You can explain and evaluate various user research methods, and hopefully you can embed user research within each stage of the design thinking process. Okay, so it's time to reflect. We have included a reflection activity along with a summary of all the information provided in the slides today. Really recommend that you go complete that activity. It'll ask you about how you identify and engage people using different user research methods. And we've come to the end. Thank you for joining us today to talk about user research for social impact. I really hope that it helps with your design thinking progress.